Never happened in this room before. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ralph Trineri. I'm the chairman of the Citizens Finance Advisory Commission. Either by a draw of short straws, a roll of the dice, or some draw of the cards, CFAC was designated and asked to be the host for this series of meetings that we're starting off this afternoon on financial, fiscal sustainability for the City of Loveland. I have to tell you that we're making history today. This is probably the first time that we have had a combined meeting of members of Loveland's various boards and commissions with invited civic leaders, and we actually have an agenda. We have some action requirements. It's not just the Boards and Commissions Summit where we get together to talk about what we did the previous year and what we want to do for the next year. Although we should make note that last year at the Boards and Commissions Summit, we came up with a pledge to try and increase our collaboration and communication between the boards and commissions. Well, we kind of waited till the 12th month to get it done. But we're going to get it done starting tonight in a very big way. A couple of notes that I want to bring to your attention. If you're like me and you walk around with an electronic leash, or as my mother calls it, my adult apron strings, please get it to do not disturb by whatever means that you have to. Another thing that you should know is that you may be noticing, if you're familiar with this room, the little red lights on the microphones. The microphones are live, and we are live on the video feed. Is it going to be saved and made available? Okay. So just like it's been happening with the City Council meetings and the Planning Commission meetings, what we do in here for the most part is going to be available to the public. And I do know that quite a few of our friends and neighbors in town have figured out how to capture and rebroadcast those. And I think one clever individual has even figured out how to plug in voice recognition software and pulls word-for-word transcripts off of some meetings. I don't know that that's where we are at. I have a tradition in my family, having had a lot of teachers and preachers in my heritage. My grandfather told me that if you're going to get in front of a room, you must always point out where the necessaries are. Because sure enough, before you are finished with your meetings, somebody will find it necessary to get up and want to leave the room and take care of necessities. And if you're not familiar with this building, go out the door, go down to the right, and you'll find both the water fountain and the necessary rooms. If you're not used to being in this room for a couple hours, this is not typically where you come to gather. You'll notice at least one of the former mayors and I do have our liquid refreshment in our hands. This is kind of a dry room. Your throat will start to dry out, so avail yourself of the water bottles. And if you want to go down to the water fountain and replenish, you're certainly welcome to do that. We are in the first session of a multi-step process. To a large degree, we need to spend the next hour and a half or so being trustees and guardians of the entire City of Loveland. And yes, we're drawing on a lot of individual expertise and valuable experiences from the various groups that we have participated in recently or in past years, but we are at a foundational level. We're kind of in the situation that my mom always hit me about. Ralph, you got 2 ears and you got one mouth. Listen a little bit more than you talk. So I'm going to be very happy to be able to sit down fairly soon and have Renee Wheeler and John Hartman lead us through several exercises with some other support from city staff that are here in the room, and even city staff that are hiding in the front row. Yeah, that's the way it works. But I'd like to point out the CFAC members that are here with us today. So my compadres in CFAC, if you stand up just for a second. Because one thing that my 5 comrades in finance are going to do is help us break into some small groups for some discussions later on. We really need the value of your experience and your ideas. We are gathering information. We need to compile it, we need to refine it, and try and fit together the big picture of what it means to be the City of Loveland and to accomplish what Loveland needs to be financially sound and sustainable for the future. Unfortunately tonight, for some of us, we're probably not at the point of being ready to debate solutions and fixes. We're gathering information. We're broadening our knowledge of how the city works, and we're going to move on from there in the next 3 weeks. For those who have not been real involved with City Council, this is going to be one of those opportunities where you're going to get to come to multiple meetings in the same month. And I know I'm boring the 2 former mayors in the room to death with that comment, but you know, it's a little bit of a reality that you know, we get a little bit insulated in the boards and commissions when we meet 1 time a month. But you know, having seen a 5-hour marathon session of City Council last night, I'm quite pleased to be in the role that I am in right now. So, any quick questions before we do something a little bit fun? You have an agenda. You've got a packet full of materials. There should be quite a few things that are very clear and others that are a little bit perhaps ambiguous. But you can't be this shy the rest of the afternoon. We're going to have to get a little bit more into it. Right, so I'll point out 2 things real quick. These neat little calculator-looking devices are going to be coming around the room before we're done. If you have not played this electronic game before, step by step, it causes problems if you get ahead of instructions. You know, it doesn't hurt to take it and just put it face down, hands off, until John tells us what to do. Come on, this is lovely. We got to have Valentine hearts. So, you have your packet. Please pull out your Valentine hearts. City Council got to do this 2 weeks ago. Only they didn't get Valentine hearts. They got craft paper. Everybody should have a Valentine's heart. That's correct. Okay, now you're going to have to help me.
Okay. I'm Nick Wheeler, Assistant City Manager here. Welcome. We're so glad you're here to help us out. It really means a lot to us that you're willing to do this with the time to us. All right, your hearts. We need, in a word, what's the thing you love the most about our community? One word. And the trick is you get 2 minutes to do that. So it means something to you quickly. All right?
Well, you got 2 hearts.
He's innovative, okay? You want to partner with him through the series of beginnings. Okay, so what do you love about Loveland? Big word. Don't change this. We love it. Oh, so we put you on the spot right away, right? As you're thinking of that word, what we're going to do is we're going to come around, you're going to stand up, say your name, what you do for a living, and then you're going to give your heart to me. I'm going to give them to CPAC members, and they're going to categorize them on the bulletin board. Write big with your marker because we want to be able to see. Trace if necessary. Coming close to the end of your time.
Well, that's not one word.
I know it's not.
So our fearless leader is the first one to violate
The one word's down at the bottom of the little bitty phrase.
Okay. Can you read that? No. Come on, Ralph. I'm gonna put family real big.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
See, Dawn wouldn't give me a marker when I came in.
Oh, yeah, our bad. Our bad. Okay, let's get started. Would you guys want to come up? All right, let's start right here. Okay, very good.
Frank McCrae, I'm a realtor here in town, and I like the people.
Okay. Standing.
I'm John Chilson. I'm retired. I've lived here most of my life.
Gene Gill and I work up at Golden Greenhouse. Wish I was retired. Yeah.
We may need to marker that. What did their hearts say? Yeah, let's say what our hearts say.
Mine said stewardship.
And location. Okay? So we've got two families.
Principal of Lamprey Earston and Lawrence Community.
Wonderful. Go ahead.
Dale Binkendorf, retired accountant just this year. And I've been in Loveland since '69, and I like the people.
Outstanding.
Don Vandell, retired engineer. I've been in Loveland 9 years. And what I like about Loveland are the volunteers.
John Tickle, I'm a retired certified psycho and parent commissioner. I used to be a psychologist. I have safety as my word.
Wonderful. Go ahead.
Theo Gore, I'm a retired engineer. I've been in the area since '89. I think I like the location.
Wonderful.
April Halbin, I'm a retired engineer.
Participation of citizens.
Michael Ford, retired, safe.
Nice. Teresa?
Teresa Heiser, retired, and mine says service, but it really means community service, as in volunteers.
Nice. Okay.
Ted Schmidt, library director, and I said the library.
Jackie Elliott, Human Services Commission. I'm retired in Foresight.
Nice. Thanks.
Allison Hay with the Community Partnership Office, and I said community.
And we welcome Allison. She just joined us. We're so excited. Go ahead.
Rich Valanci at the Communication Technology Commission. I'm a retired IT geek, and I said people.
I'm Mary Gail Jury, and I recently retired from the Philadelphia area here, and I'm on the Senior Advisory Board. And mine says homie. I'm going to skip back here. Dixie Schmatz, I'm a meeting facilitator, and we moved to Loveland in 1984, and I said people. Outstanding.
I'm Jerry Westbrook, retired. I've been in Loveland for 37 years and retired after 43 years with the Bureau of Reclamation and the Northern Water District. I said friendly.
Excellent.
I'm Amy Parsons. I'm Vice President for University Operations at Colorado State University. I resisted the urge to put proximity to CSU on mine. I put art.
Amy is an alum. She used to serve with us. She led the group.
I'm Brian Richardson. I'm a quality manager at Professional Company. I'm on the Disability Advisory Commission, and I sit located
close enough for my family to afford college, and the in-laws are about.
I'm Janet Bailey. I'm the chairperson for the Fire Rescue Advisory Commission. I'm also a real estate broker here in town, so I chose location.
That location thing going on.
I'm Jody Radke, and I work for an agency actually based in Washington, D.C. I work on tobacco control policy, so I manage 10 states and work on local, state, and national policy. So all states become smoke-free and hopefully help people quit. And my word is Karen.
My name's Buddy Myers. I'm Vice Chair of the Planning Commission. I'm a recently retired executive with the company, but my work is quality.
My name is Arthur Aldridge. I'm a small business owner here in Loveland, and with a young 2-year-old daughter at home, I quit the state.
Go ahead, Neil.
Neil Spooner. I'm with the Parks and Rec Citizen Advisory Commission. I work construction, and I put parks as in lots to do.
Great.
I'm Roger Clark. I'm an attorney. I've been here since 1973, and I wasn't smart enough to figure out how to put people who care about each other into one word, so I said park. Dear
There you go. And Rod, you gave up your heart. Okay. All right, outstanding. That was our first big blush at saying what's important to us in Loveland. So we want to be able to have priorities that keep the community together and promote family. We want a safe community that has quality services. We want to have foresight, look into the future, plan for that long-term durable solution. Location, location, location. It's all about that. Art is important to us. We want to be business friendly. We want to be good stewards of the money. We want to have services that are of good quality again. And we all chip in, just like you're doing here today. And that makes us who we are, the people. So we want to promote that ability to participate together. Very good. Now, and of course we want to leave out the library, because that's one of the great places to pull all this together. All right, what we're going to do at this point, we'll leave this up here. And John Hartman is our budget officer, and he's going to give you a little orientation. So we're going to go through, first, a pretest. CFAC members are going to hand you, CFAC and staff. This is Don, this is Tanya. We're going to hand you out your little devices again. Don't touch them. Don't touch them. That's the first thing I want to be doing. My device got messed up. And this is an exercise, one, to give us an idea of where you are in your knowledge base, and two, just to practice with these devices. So tomorrow when we use them on the exercise, or tomorrow. So yeah, I just can't wait to be together again. Next Wednesday, when we use them, you'll know how to do that. So take it away, John.
Okay, if everybody has their device, the first thing we need for you to do is up on the top row buttons, the big menu button, hit the menu button twice. And you should see presentation mode flash on your screen, and then it'll go blank. If that all goes, that means you're all hooked up and you're ready to go. What we'll do, we'll run through, what we do is we ask you a question.
What if it doesn't go?
If it didn't go, we'll trade you.
We have the same problem.
Okay. We'll ask you a question. We'll give you a set of answers. You'll see on which answer to choose. You'll have a set time to do it. We'll start off here with how does this work? There will be a series of questions with a list of possible choices. You can change your answer as long as you do it before time expires. If you answer one way and you want to change your answer, just push the new answer and it'll take that answer as long as the time hasn't expired. We'll have 10 seconds to answer the question after I finish reading. You will be able to answer before I finish reading. For you fast readers on the screen, if you want to go ahead, you'll be able to do that as well. After that, we'll display what the correct answer is. and we'll be able to show you in a graph form how we answered around the room. So here's our example. Which group of letters completes this word? When you see the green polling open go on, you can answer anytime after the green polling goes on. You have, the clock is on. So, yeah, push the number 1, 2, 3, or 4 for your answer. And the polling's closed. We only got nine in.
Is this a test?
This is to learn the test.
Okay, we're going now, huh?
So here's the way everybody answered. 44% answered number 1, 33% answered number 4, and the correct answer is number 1. If you put it in, it spells budget.
Oh.
Now, we won't. The next set of questions won't be tricky in word rearranging, but they'll be difficult in another way. So for now, we'll start for real. Which of the following services are provided by the general fund? Art in public places, public transit, street sweeping, fire inspections, 1 and 2 above, 2 and 4 above, or all of the above? And the clock is counting.
Yep.
Before the time expires.
When the poll's open.
Okay, polls closed. Most people answered 78% all above. Correct answer is 2 and 4 above. Art in public places is a special revenue fund. It has a dedicated revenue source. It's not provided by general fund revenues. Street sweeping is part of our stormwater enterprise. You pay for street sweeping through your stormwater fee that's on your utility bill. So transit and fire inspections are the 2 things out of this set that are provided by the general fund tax dollars. Which source of general fund revenue is the largest source? Property taxes, sales and use taxes, revenue sharing from state and federal governments, or fees for services? One. Ooh. Nobody wanted to take a guess.
I tried.
You did?
It's not going through.
It's not going through.
Okay.
It's not going
Mine's
through.
still here, yeah. It's one that, okay.
Back up, Dawn?
No, we
No.
can't, but we had this snafu once before. It should correct itself.
Correct
the
itself
next,
on the next slide.
On the next slide.
This is the answer.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so let's just do a quick show of hands. Property tax, do you think that's the largest one? Sales tax? Revenue share?
Okay.
Fees.
And it is. Sales and use tax is our largest source of revenue in the general fund by quite a ways. It's about, sales and use tax is about 50%. We'll talk about it more in the slideshow. Property tax is less than 10%.
John, before you start, leave the polling open and don't start the timer in case people.
Okay. The city targets what percentage for unrestricted reserves as a percentage of expenditure? 25%, 10%, 15%, or there is no target?
I'm still back on the previous question.
Everybody hit menu.
Once or twice?
Twice. Should be in presentation mode. Okay.
Send user data.
Hit it one more time.
Now try choosing.
And now do we?
That's right now. Try choosing.
It's working.
Yeah. Now I'll start the clock.
Yes, it has.
Way up and left. Percentage of what, John?
Of expenditures.
General fund expenditures?
Yeah. What do we target for unrestricted reserve? Yes, general fund.
We closed the poll.
And the poll's closed. This is the way the group answered. 15% is what we try and target. 15% is roughly 3 months' worth of operating expense in the general fund, and so that's partially how we chose that target to help us deal with unexpected circumstances. Property tax revenue in 2012 is projected to increase by 1.5%, decrease 2%, increase 5%, or remain flat compared to 2011. Okay, the poll's closed. Very good. Somebody's been reading my budget book.
Oh, look how happy you just
The property assessor is telling us that we expect property values to go down 2% from that in 2012 based on what we're hearing right now. City Council changed policy in adopting the 2011 budget to help address the structural deficit by increasing the sales tax rate, increasing city fees. They took no action, or they reduced the council reserve set aside.
Can you define structural deficit?
Structural deficit is a case where you have built-in expenses that exceed your revenues.
Are they expenses that you are compelled by law, either city, state, or otherwise?
They are the expenses we are currently experiencing to put services on the street as we do it right now. That doesn't mean we can't change that.
So it's your budgeted services
but
that you're talking.
yes.
Yes.
If we would continue doing the services as right now, it would exceed revenues. We'll start the clock. I think we've got most of them. I'll start the clock a little quicker. You guys are getting better. %71% reduce the council reserve set aside is what you said, and that is the correct answer. They reduced it from 5% of our tax revenue to 2.5% for the next 5 years. Which department has the largest general fund budget? Parks and Recreation, Police, Fire and Rescue, Public Works. And most people, well, it's about even split between police and public works. Correct answer is police, and police has quite a bit larger revenue than any of the other three. Parks and public works are the next two, and they're very close at about between 7 and 8 million, and then fire and rescue comes in at 7 million. Sales tax revenues are projected to increase. However, they're still closest to what past year of collections, 2009, 2005, 2001, or 2007. We'll start the clock. Everybody's in. And most people answered 2007, which is the correct answer. Our revenues have dropped back to 2007 levels of actual revenue collected. Which of the following is not a service provided by the general fund? Adult athletics, youth athletics, golf course, operations, Winona, Biansen Smith, the mountain park, I never can say that right, or none of the above. Most people went with none of the above. No, I'm sorry, 55% with the golf course is the largest. The golf course is the right answer. It's an enterprise fund. It receives no tax dollars. It's funded entirely by the fees that are paid through the golf rounds. All of the others are within our general fund.
Can I, is our adult athletics no longer paying its own way?
Adult athletics covers a large percent, or in fact over
100%, if I recall.
of their direct expenses, yes.
But it is in the general.
But it,
What was the question though?
What services were not, what service was not?
we're
in
not
the
a general fund service. They are, adult athletics are a general fund service. Fund balance is the difference between assets and liabilities on the balance sheet of a governmental fund. But changes in fund balance from year to year are primarily related to total revenue minus total expense, policy designations, capital purchases, or cash balance available. We got everybody in just on time. Total revenue minus total expenditures is the popular answer, and it's the correct answer. You'll hear us from time to time use fund balances and reserves almost interchangeably to some degree. But fund balance. The Street Rehabilitation Program is funded by sales tax, a transportation fee, highway users tax, or 2 and 3 above. Most people said 2 and 3, and that is the correct answer. The transportation fee you see on your utility bill every month, that covers, in 2011, it'll be about 50% of that total program, and the rest comes from highway users tax funds from the state, that's shared from the state.
And on your bill, you see it says street maintenance.
Enterprise funds are funded by property and sales taxes, rates and fees for the service, or a combination of general fund revenue and enterprise rates, federal and state revenue. Most people chose number 2, and that is the correct answer. The enterprises do not receive any taxes of any sort. Very seldom do they receive federal or state revenue even, and it's almost entirely out of their fees for service. Enterprise revenue is transferred to the general fund to keep property tax rates low, pay for administrative services, cover revenue shortfalls, the franchise fee, some combination, or none of the above. %, said 2 and 4, and that is the correct answer. We have a limited ability to transfer revenue from the enterprise funds to the general fund, but those are 2 reasons that we do it. The voters passed a ballot measure to allow the city to keep and spend revenue over the Tabor revenue limit. This measure sunsets in which year? And that is, the last measure went from 2002 to 2012, and so on December 31st it expires. and we'll be looking to see whether we come back with another motion. The mill levy for City of Loveland is 2.8, 10.3, 5.7, 9.5. We're kind of spread across the board. Number 3 is the correct answer. Or 4, I'm sorry. Number 4 is the correct answer. Just for comparison, Fort Collins is at 9.797, just slightly higher than us. Longmont's at 13.42 mils, and Greeley is at 11.274 mils.
Very good.
And
All right, so
so
now we have a
that's-
great idea. Thank you, John. That's fantastic. He's going to get set up for his presentation. You're going to really enjoy what he has to share with you. We're going to go ahead, the CFAC members are going to gather the devices. After we have the presentation, we're going to have a little break, and then we'll come back for another exercise.
I was wondering if we had our names on the back of these rules.
A little nervous. Okay, John is handing out the presentation that you just saw, so that you'll have that in your packet if you want to check back at those answers.
How many people feel that they learned something in the last 10, 15 minutes? A little bit surprised about some of those numbers, about how the money is actually used. But that was both an educational introduction and also a little bit of practice on how to use handheld devices. When we come back next week, it's not going to be quite as easy, and we're going to have to think a little bit harder.
Budget gap over a 10-year period, and that's what I want to talk to you about. I'll start with a brief explanation of how the city fund structure is set up and how we do our budgets, and then we'll get into details of where we're seeing this gap, why we've invited you here for your help. The city uses, as many of you know, what we call funds. A fund is essentially just a checking account where we can keep track of specific revenues and expenditures for different related services. We have about 28 different funds within the city, some other funds for some entities that are outside the city. All the 28 funds will fit in one of these 4 categories. The enterprise funds, these are funds that primarily provide a single service, such as delivering electricity, making sure we get water out in our pipes. They're funded by rates of usage, not by tax dollars. They do make payments to the general fund, however, so the rates that are charged to enterprise users, some of that money does come to the general fund. We had one question on the test about that. But we have a very limited liability to transfer funds out. And the management and employees of the enterprise funds, they're still subject to a citywide policy equity. And I'll explain that statement a little more later in the presentation. The Special Revenue Fund Group, these are a set of funds that have a very dedicated revenue source. They're limited primarily to a specific purpose or a single purpose, such as our open space fund, or the biggest group of funds that in this category are what we call our CEF funds. And this is where we bring in the impact fees from development that we use for capital construction of our infrastructure. Nearly all of the special revenue funds are capital oriented. There's very few employees in this whole set of funds. Those that are there, subject to the policy equity. Because nearly all of these revenues are restricted by law for that specific purpose, we cannot use them for general fund operations. The internal service funds, these are businesses within the city that provide service to the city. The services provided here are not directly to the citizens, but actually they service other city departments. Our fleet services group in vehicle maintenance is our best example that take care of our vehicles, but also our insurance services. We're self-insured for both health benefits and for liability and workers' compensation, even though we use some policies to work through that.
Question for you, are those funded out of the general fund each year?
They're funded by allocations to the user departments. So it's a combination of general fund dollars and enterprise dollars. We charge the enterprises for their share. For insurance, it's based on their actual history. We do a rolling 5-year history on their claims. And so the amount that we budget for claims, we split by that history between the user departments based on their actual history. In vehicle maintenance, we have an established labor rate that we charge, and we charge for the parts. So in both cases, it's a mixture of general fund and enterprise funds that fund these groups. And in some cases, some special revenue, although it's very limited. And then we have the general fund. This is the one most people in the public know and think when they mention something about the city, this is the fund it is. It's where most of our services are budgeted. City administration here covers a pretty wide gap. If you look around the posters of the room, you'll see a variety of the different, more detailed services that we provide. City administration covers all of our administrative support, like finance and budget, human resources, IT, all of those. The other departments are providing service directly to the public in one fashion. They're funded, the general fund is funded primarily by sales and use taxes. If you remember our question, and I said it's about 54% come through that revenue source, although we also have fees, we have fines, your traffic ticket does come to the general fund, and we have revenue from other governments. The state sends a significant amount of revenue that we use for our street maintenance as we go through. Solutions to the general fund funding gap may impact other operations. It addresses that management policy equity that we had in all of those slides. If whatever we end up deciding to fix the structural problem, we will apply that operationally citywide, because we'll treat all of our employees and the different operations the same.
Can I ask another question?
Yes, sir.
Your capital investment funds, your capital, and your enterprise funds are self-sustaining.
They are.
All right. Aside from those two funds, do the rest of your revenues go into the general?
Other than the special revenue funds as well, they're self-sustaining. So we'll be narrowing down, and what I'm going to be telling you is this is a general fund only problem. That's where we're leading to. Depending on the presentation that you're seeing, you see different numbers as far as what do we have in reserves. On the left-hand side is what you'll see in the budget book for 2011. And in it, we're projecting to end the year with almost $134 million in reserves. When we build the budget, we assume that everything that has been budgeted up to that point will be spent by the end of that year. So when we put the 2011 budget together, we assumed everything budgeted in 10 would be spent. That very rarely occurs, primarily because capital projects are multi-year in nature, and so they won't be completed. But from a budget standpoint, we see those dollars as committed. We don't want to show them as a reserve and possibly use them as double count revenue and use the same dollars to fund two different projects. So in the budget book, we'll have 134 million, about 87.7 million of that is in construction and land. That's primarily the CEF funds and the reserves in the enterprise funds for their construction. Insurance and claims, we have about 5.6 million in reserve between our health benefits and our liability and risk fund. Equipment replacement at 8.9 million, that's primarily the fleet, but it's also reserves in the enterprises for equipment. So we anticipate non-general fund in all of the funds that are not general fund to end the year with $10 million of unrestricted money, money that has no call on it at all. And we expect the general fund to end with 21.6 million in total reserves. Now when Renee, if you've watched council, every month Renee comes with a monthly snapshot and talks to council about what's the financial status of the city. That snapshot is what we have on the right. What she's reporting is what we actually have in the bank. And so until a project has been completed, or at least at a drawdown stage, the cash hasn't gone out the door yet. So what you're seeing between the 134 and the 190, we have that money budgeted, but it hasn't left yet. If you break it out in the same way, construction land at 113, insurance claims at 11, equipment replacement at 6, and the bottom line, the general fund balance at 26.8. We do expect to end the year better than we budgeted for 2010 because our revenues were slightly better than we anticipated, and we expect to get some operating savings. Now watch the $21.6 million number from the budget side. This is what makes that up. We've got $6 million in Tabor reserves. That's a combination of two different reserves. We have one that is revenue that has come in over the revenue limit that the voters have allowed us to keep and spend. In our financial plan, we've been allocating that toward street construction so that because once it drops into that reserve, it's essentially like a one-time money. And so if we use it to fund the street program, that frees up money under the cap for ongoing expenditures for our other agencies. The other reserve, under the amendment, it requires us to keep 3% of our operating expense in a reserve for an emergency reserve. We can only use that for a council-declared emergency. And from a budget side, we try and stay away. I hope we never go into that reserve. Because the other part of the amendment says that you have to replace that reserve in the very next year. So it's about a $3 million reserve. If it's about a $3 million reserve and we would use it all, we would have to cut the operations budget by about $3 million that next year so that we could replace that reserve. Our sister up in Fort Collins went through that with the Spring Creek flood. And they had a devil of a time. They tapped it for that, and they had a difficult time in their budget the next year trying to make things work. We have some small reserves for equipment replacement and some miscellaneous other replacement needs. We expect to end with $10.3 million of unrestricted money in the general fund. Now, remember the question about what we target for reserves. We target 15% of expenses. That equals about $9.6 million. So we've really, if our solutions that we come up to in this funding gap are something that we want to phase in, we don't want to do the full thing the very first year, but phase it over a couple of years. We only have about $700,000 in reserve money that we could put toward that phasing. So we don't have a lot of money that way that we could use to stretch something out. So what's our problem? Again, this is a general fund only problem. The enterprise funds are in good shape. Special revenue funds are covered by their revenues. This is just a general fund problem. And what we're projecting is that over the next 5 to 10 years, general fund revenues will not allow the city to continue to provide service in the way that we have in the past. Our challenge here is to find a permanent, durable solution. We've done a 10-year plan for many years. And for many years, we've told council that we've got this structural deficit coming, but it was always way out in the back end of the plan. The recession changed that game. And so we want to find a solution that works for the 10 years of the plan. We don't want to use one-time resources. All that does is solve the problem for 1 year. And your problem, it comes back to you the very next year. At council, I said it's sort of like what my daughters do occasionally with their rooms. They just sweep the dirt under the rug. We still got to go back in and vacuum it. We don't want to use gimmicks. We've seen talk in papers about other government units trying to solve their budget problems, and they take an expense and move it from 1 year to another, or there's other things to do. We don't want to do any kind of gimmicks. If it's going to be durable, it's got to last and work year after year. And whatever we do, we've got to be as happy with it today as we are 5 years from now. And end up aligning our expenses with revenue for the foreseeable future. The gap's about $3.5 million. Actually, for 12, it's 3.1. It will grow to 3.5 by 2015. And while it varies from year to year, it's fairly consistently at 3.5 million throughout the 10-year plan. Here's the top 7 reasons why we see that we're in this position. First is we have drastically reduced construction of both residential and non-residential properties. The housing market, when it crashed, and now commercial property is coming back around. We expect this low level of building to continue for at least the next 2 to 3 years and maybe longer. Sales tax revenue has dropped to 2007 levels, as we mentioned in the slide. While we expect sales tax to begin to grow again, and we've seen some of that in 2010, we don't expect it to grow at the level, at the growth rate that we have experienced in the past, and we don't expect it to pick up soon. Property taxes, we've already briefly mentioned through the test. The assessed valuations are going down, and we're not going to see the growth rates in the future that we used to see on property. Property values are going to stay fairly flat for a while. Revenue sharing from the State Highway Users Trust Fund is projected to stay flat or maybe even decrease. This is a major revenue source for us. We know the state has its own budget problems. We read about it in the paper every day. If the state reduces the Highway Trust Fund to keep our streets repaired at the same level that we have, we'll have to reallocate resources from somewhere else to get it done. And through our capital plan, we do have some new amenities and infrastructure coming online that will increase our operating costs slightly. Some myths. Yes?
Are there other shared revenues coming from the state or the feds that go into the general fund that might also be impacted?
Most of our money that comes from the state is all highway related. The other major source of revenue that we get intergovernmental-wise from the feds fund is transit grants. And so depending on what FTA does, may impact what we do with our transit program. But those are the 2 major sources that get intergovernmental revenue.
And the budget assumption for the state roads highways is going to decrease, but the federal transit is going to remain the same?
Yes.
That's the assumptions. Okay.
One question on the state's Highway Users Trust Fund. What funds that at the state level? Is that out of gasoline consumption?
It's the gas tax. For the most part, it's gas tax, vehicle fees, registration fees. There's a variety of different fees, all vehicle related, that go into that. The state then, you can probably explain this better than I can, but there's 3 different pots that they divide that money into. It funds the state patrol, it funds all of CDOT's operations. Then they distribute some back to the counties and some back to the cities.
In your projection of the number you're going to get from the state, did your projections bake in current turmoils in the Mideast that may affect gas consumption in the United States and price thereof?
Well, we know that the gas tax is not keeping up. Just from an inflation standpoint, it's been at the same level going back several years. And so, while the price of gas goes up, that doesn't increase. The only way we'd increase the revenue stream is to increase miles traveled. And our miles traveled are actually going down, as well as the push to get higher mileage vehicles. So we're seeing the amount of tax revenue per driver starting to drop, even though we've still got the same amount of roads to maintain.
You know, where I was going at with it, if we see some of these projections of $4 to $7 a gallon gas that economists talk about, that could drive that consumption down lower and in turn reduce that gas tax revenue we get because consumption drops.
But and even if it went that high, and even if it stayed the same, our take on that doesn't change.
Right. But if consumption goes down,
then it does. Okay. And that's why we're looking at least at it staying flat. Now we put these together as part of the 2011 budget, so some of these assumptions are about 6 months old, but they're still pretty close to being current. We'll be changing as we see things happen as well. But yeah. Reasons that did not contribute to this: purchase of the property on 402, the swimming pool for LHS, the downtown improvement. All 3 of these came out of reserves. And they were funded out of money that was saved up, so it was one-time revenue, not an ongoing revenue source.
But on the 402, you're also paying an interest fee, and that comes out of your general budget, does it not?
No, it's coming out of the reserve money as well. The way we have budgeted for that is all to come from that council capital reserve. The fund balance in that reserve is almost enough to pay for that in its entirety. The only piece of that maybe comes into play in the ongoing side is there's the ongoing contribution to that reserve that is done by ordinance, which is
so it's just a 2-step instead of a 1-step of impacting your general fund. That's what you said.
Well,
right.
Why don't you clarify that? What does that mean to you? What does that look like to you?
Are you talking?
Yeah, I am. Sorry.
Your purchased property didn't, but you're making interest payments on that.
You have to replace the reserves?
And so that's what I was going to say. Then you replace your reserves out of your general fund.
We do.
And so it's a 2-step thing to get around to it, but it still impacts the general fund.
It is there, but because the ordinance by council requires us to put aside 2.5% every year from our operating revenue stream, and in this analysis that we're going forward, we've already taken that out of our revenue stream for operating purposes. Whether if we hadn't spent it on the land, we would have still been making the contribution to the reserve. The reserve balance in that reserve would have just grown further.
And now it's not.
It's still growing. It grows every year because we have to make a contribution every year. And since that ordinance has been in place, that has been out of our operating revenue stream from the very beginning. And so that's part of what we looked at to get to how this structural deficit happened. And the first thing we had to realize was not all of the revenue we generate gets to go for operating expenses. We have some calls on it that we have to take out first, and this is one. The Tabor 3% reserve is another. That grows every year if our expenses grow. So when you look at it as what's the revenue that's available for our operating stream, this has already been taken out. And the only way that we could use it and put it back in is if council would forever get rid of the reserve.
several of them. The VNet issue. Again, that was an incentive deal. I know it's been in the paper a lot. It's an incentive that didn't go the way we wanted it to because of the recession. Again, it was one-time money. This is money that had been saved up. It was a one-time payment. It's not an ongoing type of deal, so it's not part of this structural deficit. We're not talking about whether it was right or wrong use of the money, but it was one-time money. And so it's not part of the problem that we're talking about now. The library and Chilson expansions, while they come with additional operating costs, these two projects were chosen primarily because they come with low operating costs. Chilson will about pay for itself with its new fees and new activity that it's charging there. The library is coming with only about 2 new FTEs, very few new employees. The only thing that we've got is the heat and light building. So those two projects compared to a lot of the projects in the plan come to us at a fairly low cost.
Do you have I'm sorry, the downtown improvements, do you have operating costs for some of that stuff that we've said we're going to take care of? Like a new parking lot, someone has to attend the plans and plow it and light it. Rialto Bridge, so far,
Rialto Bridge,
we're taking care of operations and maintenance.
Rialto Bridge still in the works. We're waiting.
Well, yeah. So have you taken that into account?
And it's not built into this 10-year plan that we've done here. Some of the other improvements that have taken place so far, yes, we do have some maintenance there. The cost to build them were from reserves. To take care of them now is a relatively minimal change in the operating side of things. So, we have to take care of the alley, we have to take care of the parking lot, but once you get the pavement laid, there's not a whole lot you need to do with it from then on until it comes time that you've got to repave it. So, some background. Again, our intent was, as I said, we've been doing this 10-year planning for a long time. And we've been seeing this problem occur out in the second 5 years for as long as I've been doing it, I think. And we told council we've got a structural deficit coming, but we look good. When we were saying this and looking at it, we were kind of doing a bottom line analysis. And as long as we were seeing that we had plenty of fund balance, he said we were all right. What I got challenged with was, this thing keeps showing up, and now you're saying it's coming closer. We need you to show us what's causing this to happen. So we changed from that bottom line analysis to look at it, take fund balance as a resource out of the equation, because you use fund balance or reserves to fund one-time things. We wanted to look at just what was our operating revenue, taking that chunks that we couldn't use for operations out of the stream, so that we got to what was our real operating revenue stream. What did we have to fund services, and what were the expenses that had to come just from that stream? So like I said, we took fund balance out. We also took out expenses from the fund balance because they are paid for that money. So we were looking at what's our ongoing revenue, what's our ongoing expenses, and how do they match up. The assumptions used in the plan: sales tax to increase 3% in 12, 4% in the other years through 2015. Building use tax to increase 2%. And let me back up real quick just to give you some context. In 2004 through 2007, sales tax was increasing 7 and 8% annually. Building use tax, we average at 2%. In that same time period, it increased 10% annually every year. Property tax, we've talked about it starting to go negative. If it grows, it's going to come back very slowly. Increasing our fees for charges and services of 3.5%, that's pretty standard operating procedure for us budgetarily. We've done that, about that percentage for many years. When you bring all the revenue together, and just go back to your bottom line, we're looking at revenues to increase at 2.7% in 12, about 3.3 in the remaining years of the plan. On the expense options, we assumed that the core budgets will increase 3.5% annually. You start to see our structural deficit problem. We've got revenues at 2.7 to 3% growth, expenses at 3.5%. There's the start of our gap right out of the box. The 3.5% in the plan, we're not fine on exactly what that is, but it could include things like compensation for employees. We're pretty sure our health costs are going to keep increasing, as is everybody else. We know there's operating inflation. When we've been building the department's budget, we haven't given them inflation in their base budgets for 7 or 8 years, even though we know that inflation's there. So we've been cutting their operations side even without it. It costs us more to buy materials now than it did last year. The capital program operating impacts have been included into the plan. Equipment replacement, we have within the general fund a lot of different kinds of equipment. Everything from sprinklers to playground equipment to street equipment, a broad spectrum, police, vests, guns, all their different things they need. We've got a 5-year plan that we have the departments do every year on what those equipment replacement needs will be. And so we've included that in the plan. And general fund capital costs match our capital program.
I've got one question. On the core budget, when you said you weren't fine, is the 3.5% an aggregate outlook? Or you don't have it broken down like if one department was like 10%, somebody else was like 2%?
No, it's an aggregate. We increased each of the department's budgets 3.5%.
And are you absorbing the entire COLA increases in 2011 since you haven't done them for the last 7 years?
In 2011, yes. We didn't even absorb it. We told them their budget was staying flat and they would have to find a way around that, even though their operating purchases cost more. So they're having to deal with that as a budget reduction, in essence.
Okay, so you're passing it back to them as a budget reduction.
We've reduced our purchasing power and we haven't added dollars in to make up for that. So they've lost purchasing power every year. The capital costs, and capital often seems like, we'll get to the capital costs. Give you a picture. This is what our gap looks like looking at the plan. The top line, the black line, is our expenses. As you see, in 11, we're balanced. We did build a balanced budget, and if you look historically, we've built balanced budgets every year. The difference is in most of those years, the way we got there is we used some one-time resources, or we made one-time types of decisions. A furlough is a one-time kind of a decision. We cannot keep furloughing employees every year unless we are going to come out and say we're going to cut the work week forever. So we've used, in a variety of different ways, one-time kind of decisions to balance that, as well as some ongoing. The 2010 had a lot of employees that went away. And so we've made some ongoing adjustments already. We're still seeing this gap appear. This is a different picture of it. What it's designed to show is that the biggest portion of that general fund budget is in the base. That's what the big gray bar is. You can see that equipment replacement, even that 3.5% increase, those are minor pieces of our puzzle here. And so while we could go to them, they're not going to solve our problem. Our problem is in that base.
One question, just kind of looking at it. I see in 2011 you've got a pretty large line there, red, that's new operating. That's just above the base there, above the 3.5% increase. Is that directly related to the capital projects?
It is.
Now, does that red then become part of the new base in 2012?
It does.
So the same thing would happen then in 2015, that red would now increase your base in 2016?
Yes.
Just out of curiosity, in 2015, just relatively on the size of the chart, looks big. What is that from?
There's 3 different projects that are in the capital plan in that year. One is that we're looking to expand the service center and move our solid waste and stormwater operations out there to get the trucks out of that downtown facility. We'll need to heat and light that building, as well as some heated storage for the trucks. We're proposing to bring on an additional engine in a fire station, essentially a fire 2 serve as 2 stations. And that means we've got to bring on staffing for a full engine, which is 9 to 12 firefighters. That's also the year that we have a planned expansion for the museum coming online on the property that we bought north of the museum where the Home State Bank building is. And based on the scope of that project right now, that comes with a fairly significant staff and a large square footage of building to heat and take care of. That's that big jump.
Thank you.
So if the base is our problem, what's our base look like? The general fund is a service industry. We're labor intensive. It's the way we have to operate because we're services. And so most of our money is going into the personnel services, salaries, benefits. This is a quick summary. And again, at 3.1, but we expect it to grow out to 3.5 by 2015. Just another quick picture. Again, it's the base is where we've got our problems. For people in the enterprises, with the employees, we've been showing this slide. I don't work in the general fund. Why do I care? This is only a general fund problem, as I've said before. But any operational changes that we do, we will do citywide. And so there will be impacts to the enterprise funds based on any operational changes we might make. Also, new revenue solutions may be finding ways to increase either the bill, take a harder look at what we're charging for administrative services, find a way to increase our transfers from the enterprise funds. If there are not future rate increases, this will limit the enterprise fund's ability to operate and do capital expansion as well. So that is part of why the enterprises need to care. We are one city. We welcome the employees. We've asked them for suggestions, and we continue. We've been meeting with them the last 3 weeks, showing them essentially this slideshow as well. And so we've got the discussion and part of this process all going in another way. Do we want to hit on the process or just go to questions?
Yeah, hit on the process because we need to demonstrate how you fit into the bigger picture of what we're trying to accomplish with this process.
So here's what we've got. We're trying to develop a clear understanding of the problem. We've been to council in a study session. That's part of what this one is. We've got management team working. We've been meeting with the employees, CFAC, all to define this problem and get an understanding of it. We'll start setting principles and priorities. We need to set principles so that we have a way of deciding what things are good ideas and what not. Our city manager has said, and I'll borrow from him, you've probably all been in groups where they said, let's brainstorm. Any idea is a good idea, let's just get them up on the board. Not every idea is a good idea. But we need to have a way of deciding which of those are good ideas and which of those aren't. So we need to develop some principles on which we base our decisions as we move forward. We've talked with council. Like I said, they've done a survey for us. We've started the public engagement process with this. And we hope that we'll move through there. We will be doing the survey tool with voting technology in our next session. You can
said there that CPAC is hosting this. We've got the 2 to 3 meetings, depending on if we need our third one. And the bottom dot points are how this group came to be about. We're right now in the data gathering process. This isn't about solution. We've just got to get the data together so that we can look at all the data that will affect our decisions. We hope to bring this process to fruition by the end of May, and that's chosen for a reason, because June is when we typically kick off the 2012 budget process. So we want to try and go through this process to use that as guidance in building 2012 and the financial plan from then on. This is just a quick schematic of, we're going to have a lot of things going at once, but this is how we see the process shaking out. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Is it fair to say, John, if this whole process takes care of this $3.1 million shortfall in 2012, and you don't reinstate some of the things that are cut in the 2012 budget, then the problem goes away until the revenue picks up?
As long as if the assumptions stay the same throughout that time frame, yes. If there's not an assumption that we have to change, that would be accurate, yes.
Thank you.
One of the things you mentioned is that it's, well, I'll refer to it as people cost, that is the largest portion that needs to be looked at. One thing that I don't have a clear understanding, and maybe other people do, maybe you can help me with, is the issue that a lot of other state and local governments around the country are dealing with, and it's retirement funding. Where do we stand, and how does that all fit into this?
We don't have a benefit. We have a program that's essentially a 401k. The city contributes 5% of an employee's salary. It moves up to 9% based on years of service at some point. The employee contributes 3% in. It's how much they have for retirement is based on how the 401k does in the market. It's not a defined benefit program, so there's not that extended liability that we see in some of the other states.
So it is an expense every year. There's no reserve for it. There's a contribution that the employee and the city make.
Right.
Okay, and then it's gone from budgetary concerns.
Right. So it's just an ongoing expense for our part of that 5% of their salary on an ongoing basis.
So that's about what it averages, 5%.
We've been edging a little closer to 6. The age of our employees is getting older. We found that if an employee makes it through 5 years here, they're probably going to stay. And so, since I've been here, we've moved up from averaging about 5.6, 5.8 to 6.1. So it gets a little bit closer to 6, but a large part of our salary population is in that 5% range.
One question, you had showed us on the slide that showed total city reserves, the insurance claims, are those medical claims, or are they a combination of workman comp's claim, medical claims, and automobile or vehicular?
Combination of all three.
That's everything.
We have 2 different funds for our insurance. We have one specifically for health, and then we've got one for liability and workers' compensation.
And that's all self-insured by the city?
And it's all self-insured by the city.
Okay.
In our health insurance, we do carry a policy, we call it a stopgap policy, so that once a claim hits a certain limit, then a private carrier takes over and pays above that.
So you can stop those.
So we've minimized our risk. Our risk is only this much of a claim in case it's a really, really bad claim. We
We pay for that. I mean, that's an insurance product. That's one insurance product we do pay for as your regular insurance product.
When you showed the composition of this group, there was a component that said members of the public who responded to inquiries or something to that effect. How was that done? And are there members of this group that are not either appointed by the council or representatives of commissions or boards?
All public is welcome. This is a public meeting, so we put the.
If they came, would they get a little?
They would.
Yes. Of the 60 people, we've got. Well, you must have been.
Is there a, this is a dumb question. Obviously, the economy's bad, but.
Not dumb question.
Well, it's good. Just wait till I ask. It seems like we've got a few new businesses that would be helping the tax revenue go up. Since 2007, Walmart, you know, and maybe my calendar's off in my head, but a few auto dealerships out, like Crossroads. Plus, you know, you keep mentioning the cost of materials goes up, and I know that happens in my household, so.
That does.
Why isn't revenue?
What we're seeing, to believe, is that there's been a real reset in the consumer and in consumer patterns. And that, yes, we have more, but there's not near the discretionary income in the ordinary citizen that there used to be. When they were able to refinance homes and get seconds on their homes and pull cash out, and then they could go buy big purchases, the new TVs and that. Well, that piggy bank's gone now.
Okay.
And so we're seeing consumer spending as a whole drop now. The basics, do they still got to buy it? You still got to buy food and some other basics that are out there, but the discretionary spending as a whole, we think it's dropped, and it's not coming back until we start getting more jobs and more discretionary income in there. You're right, we've got more places to shop, but the people aren't shopping.
And remember, when we're opening a new Walmart, there's a new Walmart that's outside of our town too, so sometimes the customer just goes to Walmart that's closer to them, so there's leakage from other like stores.
And
and maybe no car dealerships have shown up, but from the middle of town to inside of 4 communities now.
Yeah. Auto sales has been another that you've seen in the news. They've had a tough time the last 2 or 3 years, and that's part of the change. People aren't just recycling their cars every 3 years. They're finding out that they can run a little bit longer with that car. So our auto use, that's another use tax that we have, but we've seen that drop off as well. It's started to come back again, but again, it's not growing.
Break down everything that contributes to the general fund?
Of what?
Everything that contributes to the general fund, the percentages and all that. Sales tax is so much.
Sales tax is about 54% of our revenue. Property tax is about 10%. And that's sales and use tax. So regular sales tax, building use tax, auto use tax is 54%. Another 10% is property tax. The remaining 30% is from fees and fines and state government share.
Are utilities part of that?
No, utilities go to the enterprise funds. That's the utility revenue, is enterprise revenue.
Recently that some flyer that sales tax in Loveland had not gone up in 26 years. Did I see that?
Sales tax rate.
Okay.
Not sales tax revenue.
Okay.
The sales tax rate's been at 3% since 1988, or in thereabouts.
So why?
Well, several reasons. Paper is one of them, because to increase the rate, we'd have to go to a vote of the people. And 2, from 2004 to 2007, we didn't have this structural problem. Our sales tax and our use tax were growing faster than our expenses were. So there was not a reason to come and ask the public for an additional tax at that point, because of what the collections were doing. The world's turned. It's a different time now.
Your shortfall was about, so I figured, 10% of the sales tax revenue.
That's probably about 5% of the
Raising
total
the sales tax rate ruled out as a bad answer?
It's not. And one of the things we'll be looking at, and the management team has one committee looking at, as part of our process, is we're looking at all answers. So revenue's not off the table. Could we increase, go to the voters to increase sales tax? Maybe. Could we go and increase our mill levy? That's a possibility as well. Could we, is there some other kind of tax? So we've got a management team looking at other revenue ideas to see, is there a way we can solve this on the revenue side, not just on the expense side?
Does that mean our role is to look at the expense side only?
We're going to look at priorities. And then you'll have an opportunity in a small breakout session tomorrow, and then tomorrow, I keep wanting to be here tomorrow, next week, to talk about solutions that you might like to bring to the table, you might like to suggest, okay? We're going to have to wrap this up so that we can take a 5-minute break and come back for the last exercise of the day. If you have any other questions, John and I will both have our cards available to give to each of you by the end of the session, and please use that, either that phone number or that email, and we'll get it to you right away. So take 5. We'll be back at 5:36.
That's required. Not everything they do.
Library programming supports that has a fire, we help out. Library children's program, emergency management, library program, library record, medical research.
Counting and budgeting.
It's nice to have. What is it? Designing. Get rid of it so that people are not stressed by
Well,
driving.
we're not going to have new construction. It's
nice
going
to
to be
have.
way down. That would be, put a red one, because we don't need it for the next 5 to 10 years with all the construction. Okay? You got to have something in that
I've got a beer right now. How many
There will be some, you got to have. That's,
Library delivery.
Required. I'm on the library.
I'm representing seniors.
Cable television.
No, you make a good point. A lot of the stuff, every single one of the shows is actually being hosted and served with an agreement with the city of Fort Collins right now. So we don't need another cable.
Well, you won't have your city on TV.
Yes, you will. You have access to it.
I wonder how many people actually.
I've never heard of it.
Fire mutual library program.
I think that's extremely important. We need a literate community.
But library programming to support the schools. Okay.
Which means we have things they need.
Why don't the schools do that themselves? Ah, okay, so
I wouldn't want to.
Library children's
I bet you don't even know how many children. My children know. Programs in lower income areas to provide books and encouragement. I
think that's extremely important.
We have to go back to what that was.
What is the northern banks passport? What is that?
Police evidence collection and management.
Medical response.
We just got out of it this year with one of our budget and fire commissioners. It ended up in our nice to have.
Not just but
Oh, we're going to the majority. Yeah, that's for people that can't, that's a disabled.
I gotta say, it's a nice one too. I mean, I've got a mother that depends on it in Littleton, but the fact is, you can do it.
I think it's nice to have
right out.
And all has to do with law enforcement.
Help slow traffic.
I don't know how you cannot have that. It costs more money than lawyers. Speaking as a lawyer.
What is that for like? It's a part of the
We're supplementing if it gets to push
Use
shove,
the
that's one thing.
shelter, pavilions, but to go to the park is free.
gotta have it.
It'd be nice to have it.
I said we could do without. Yeah, the gray team.
Just all four-way stops all over town. Otherwise, let's experiment.
Of what?
Ladies and gentlemen, if you attended for the 4 o'clock group, could you please move out into the hallway so the 6 o'clock folks can get settled? And
to cut costs
recess, be ready to
without cutting
do
activities.
the
This is
second
rarely
half of
effective.
the meeting.
It's not a
Thank you, and I look forward to seeing you next week.
It's what you do. It's the work you do. That's how we get more of that.
6:30 next Wednesday. 6:30 next Wednesday, and we'll have everybody here once. 6?